Hey guys, this is Scott Rose and I'm the Campfire Colonel. Today's episode we're going to cover the fundamentals of flint knapping. Hey guys, so this is the fundamentals of flint knapping, and disclaimer, I am not an expert in this. There are people that may be watching this that are a lot better than I am, but I'll try to give you just the basics, the fundamentals of someone who is trying to start this. I started doing this. I picked up my first piece of rock to flint knap in the early to mid 90s, so I have been doing it about 25 years, and I've learned from other people and watched videos, and I'm going to share with you the things I know. Some of you may do things differently, but hopefully you'll learn something from this. What is flint knapping? Okay, flint knapping, the word knapping means to chip or to break off with a sudden strike or force. A lot of flints were used in guns, a little piece of flint to ignite gunpowder. So flint knapping is to break or chip a piece of stone to turn it into a stone tool. The first thing I want to talk about is protective equipment before you even get started. I like to wear long pants. You know, I would flint knap with shorts in the summertime, and some of these materials that you use are very, very sharp when the chips come off, and could hit your legs, and I've been cut. So I recommend long pants. I also recommend gloves. I always wear leather gloves to protect my hands. Some people don't, but I've cut my hands a lot not wearing them, and so I recommend you wear gloves. I also recommend eye protection. I wear reader glasses, so my eyes are protected. If not, I mean, you can use a face shield, you can wear goggles or safety glasses, but please protect your eyes. I've had chips come off and ping right into my glasses, and if I didn't have eye protection on, it would have went right into my eye. So the other last thing is, if you're indoors, I recommend a protective mask. I usually like to flint knap outdoors where the wind and the air currents take the dust away, because the silica dust is very sharp on a microscopic scale, and it can damage your lungs. One final thing is some pads for your leg. I've got a bunch here. I probably don't need this many, but it does protect your leg. If you flint knap on your leg, or I tend to strike my leg with my billet quite a bit, so the more the better. So I keep adding to it. Some people sew them together. I don't, I just stack them up. Some other terminology that'll help as I'm talking to understand what I'm talking about is the different sizes of the stone that you're working with. These are referred to as nodules, kind of in the raw form that you find so it's a big rock that you find the piece, the stone you're working with. It's called a nodule. The next stage is a spall, and this is basically a nodule that has been cracked open or a piece broken off. So it's kind of in a unrefined stage. The next stage is a biface. Bi meaning two faces. So it's already kind of like reduced down to a smaller size, and it's on its way to being some type of usable tool. The next size is the flake, and that is basically what comes off the bifaces and the spalls. So these are pieces that have been chipped off, and they are exactly what the name implies, a flake, or it's almost like a potato chip size. One thing about the flakes is a lot of these pieces you can turn into a point, an arrow point, or knife, or some type of tool. And then the final phase is also called debutage. Just basically what you're left over with, the rubble, and usually the stuff that you can that you throw away. Okay, next let's talk about tools. Now there's two very different schools of thought on this. There's the abo tools. Abo is short for Aboriginal. And then there's the copper tools. I learned how on copper, so that's probably what I'm going to demonstrate mostly. I know how to use the abo. It's a little harder for me, but just because I didn't learn how. I really respect the people that can do those. But let's talk about each one in just a little bit. You have first your billets for percussion flaking, and I'll talk about what that is in a minute. This is a moose antler billet turned into a club. This is white-tailed deer antler. Okay, you can also use what's called a hammerstone, and this is for used in the same way, but you hold each a little bit differently. Okay, and so you're striking flakes off that way. So that's percussion flaking. Pressure flaking. Most people that use abo tools use an antler tine of some type. You can put this into a long stick, cut a piece off and fit it into a long stick. It's called an ishi stick. It gives you more pressure, more power, because you can use your legs as well as your body. I have some ishi sticks here in the copper form. So this is pushing flakes off with the point of the tine, the antler tine. This is a rib bone. This is for a notching tool. Some people use tines for making the notches in the bottom of the arrow points. So you also need some abrading stones. So most abo users have a piece of sandstone. It's just kind of a real rough to grind the edges. Here's a big piece of sandstone. And you also need a pad for your hand to protect your hand when you're doing, especially when you're doing pressure flaking. Moving over to the copper tools, these are some of the ones I use. Here's some others. These are the equivalent of the billets, okay, are basically a wooden handle with a copper cap and filled with lead usually to give it some weight, some heft. Here's some other examples in different sizes, okay, depending on what stage you're at. The pressure flaker is equivalent to the antler tine. In the copper age, copper was very valuable, and they had little small chunks of it, and they would melt it down and still make stone tools using copper way back. So this is my pressure flaker, and then I can use these as pressure. This one's with a copper point. These are steel, basically a flattened nail and filed. I use those for both pressure flaking and notching, the same as this tool here. Some people use something like that. I've used it before, but I prefer a steel nail for my notching. And I'll talk about what notching is in a minute. And then I've got the Ishii sticks, the ones you saw there. This is the one I use mostly. I've got my hand pads instead of a leather pad to do my pressure flaking. And then my abrading stones are sharpening stones and rubbing bricks that you can find at a building supply, and it's for sanding concrete. Now the whole process is centered around the Hertzian cone. Now you've probably seen where a BB gun has hit a piece of glass and made this cone-shaped fractures, conchoidal fracture. I have a couple here that I tried on some bottles. Usually about 100 degrees to 104, 105. What you're doing is every time you strike a piece of rock, you are making one of those cone-shaped fractures. And the trick is to adjust this cone so that you're taking off thinning flakes. For percussion flaking, what I'm looking for is the middle part, the center line of this piece. And you'll notice that it's a little bit lower here than over here. And so I'm going to find a platform and strike a thinning flake off of that using the conchoidal fracture, Hertzian cone. And I want to strike this platform and take this ridge off. The fracture will run along this ridge here. And if you notice, the edge of this piece is really sharp and jagged. Well, that's what the abrading stone is for, and it's to grind these platforms down so that if I hit this with my billet, it's just going to crush and the flake is not going to travel. But if I beef it up with grinding it a little bit, it will make a better platform in allowing the flake to travel a little better. Put my pad on here, get my gloves on, and then I'm going to probably start adjusting my center line so I can set up my platforms that I want to start with on this piece. First I'm going to chip down, and I'm kind of going at almost a perpendicular angle, and all I'm doing is I'm moving that center line down to where I want to start. Okay, on some of these different sides I'll make a couple so that I'll be ready to strike this when we start. Okay, now I'm going to grind those edges that I just moved. I moved my center line up by striking straight down. And I'm going to grind all the way around it just because this thing is kind of sharp all the way around. And don't rush it. Pick the platform that you want to start with. Remember, I'm going to focus on the ends first, and then I'm going to work toward the middle. Okay, I think I found the first one I'm going to try is right here. Just this platform is below the center line, and I want to take off, try to take off a big chunk of this thickness right here. There's different schools of thought on this. Some people nap on their leg like this. Some people hold it and nap. Where you hold this, you don't want to hold it too low because it's just the Hertzian cone is going to go straight down. You don't want to hold it too much, too high, or the Hertzian cone is going to travel through the middle and crack your piece in half. Okay. And so you'll think I'm missing, but I'm just doing a couple of warm-ups, kind of like a golf swing. Okay. So I took off fairly good flake, not as much as I wanted right there. I'm going to switch to the I've been finding that the lap napping seems to work a little better lately, so I think I'm going to step up a size to my next bigger billet, and then I'm going to come in at it this way. Okay, that was a pretty good flake. You can see right where it was. And you see it thinned it a little bit right there. Now I have a good ridge that I want to focus on right here. Maybe knock some of that off. Make sure my platform's good and strong. Okay. Okay. Look at that nice flake. And that did some very good thinning just now. You can see right where that flake traveled along this ridge line here, and is very substantially thinned my piece a little bit. Now I can take this and turn that into a knife as well. This flake is razor sharp. So the next phase is pressure flaking. And I'm going to use this little piece of gold sheen obsidian to demonstrate. I would normally clean this up with some more percussion flaking, but it's got some good platforms on here to show you how the pressure flaking works. Okay, again, I'm a copper napper, so I use a rubber pad and a copper pressure flaker. I'm going to start with my issue stick. I'm going to take off some of these thick areas. I want to use the same principle. I want to start on the ends and work my way to the middle. Pressure flaking is still using the center line of the piece and still using the principle of the Hertzian cone. Instead of striking flakes off, you're pushing them off or pulling them off with your pressure flaker. Okay, I'm still going to braid my platforms to make them sturdy to carry the flake. And I'm going to start with this platform that's below center line first. Okay, I'm going to place, my pad has a little channel in it to allow the flake to run as a support the piece on the pad. I want to make sure it's good and supported, especially at the tip when I'm working on the ends, because if I'm working this way, a lot of times a fracture will run and snap your tip off. So you always want to support your platform really well. Okay, so I'm going to use my legs to squeeze on this, and I'm going to come just above the center line of that platform and push and squeeze. Okay, that sounded good. Okay, it did take off that thick spot. The flake is still in my hand there, and I'm well on my way to straightening out this platform here. I'm going to switch to my smaller pressure flaker and work on this area right here, and maybe straighten that up. This is all about, I'm getting close to finishing, so I'm straightening and sharpening the edge. Okay, so that's a pretty flake that just come off there. Again, these flakes, especially on obsidian, are razor sharp. You look at them under an electron microscope, and they are much sharper than a steel scalpel. The last phase is notching. This point is kind of getting close to a stage where it could be notched. I would probably spend a little more time on it, get it cleaned up a little better. To notch it, what I do is I start with figure out where I'm going to notch it. I think I'll do kind of a corner notch on both sides. A notch is where you would put it onto an arrow shaft or a spear shaft, atlatl dart shaft, and lash it on, tie it on. What I start is, and I'm not a professional notcher by any stretch, but I start with a flake and run it down the direction that I'm going to notch it. And so see, I just run a nice long flake in this direction, and that's where my notch is going to go. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, now take my notching tool, and again I use a steel pointed pressure flaker, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go at this, taking off Hertzian cones straight down, on flipping over both sides, and just travel this thing in there hopefully without breaking my point. And I like to use a little extra pad here to support my flakes, and I'm going to come straight at it. Okay, you see that little cone that broke off? And I'm going to flip that over. You see the little Hertzian cone right in there. I'll flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. Grind it just a little bit with my flaker so it's not a sharp cone. And I'm going to push below center line straight down. And I made a little flake there. I'm going to keep going on this side for a little bit, and then I'll do the other side. I took it a little ways. I didn't go very far into it for fear of breaking it, but you get the idea. Be on the shaft of the arrow, and then you would lash it to it, and you'd have an arrow point or an atlatl spear point. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that episode. Like I said before, I'm not an expert, but I do have about over 25 years of experience off and on doing this as a hobby. I love it. It's a fun hobby. I recommend it. Protect yourself, and just do your research. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the page, and hope to see you on the next episode.